Okay, my name is Matt Buedel. I'm a reporter with the Journal-Star, and I'm joined here today by Division Chief Tony Ardis, who is in charge of operations for the Peoria Fire Department. Thank you, Tony, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We've got a Sunday package coming up that I worked on that has to do with some firefighting issues, and I think the core of it really has to deal with why it's important to have quick response times. And so we wanted to have you here today to sort of school us on some fire training and firefighting response issues and tools and techniques and how it all works. And maybe some of it we know and some of it we don't know. So again, thank you for being here. Why don't we start out and tell us a little bit about yourself and your history with firefighting and the Peoria Fire Department. I know you've been there about 24 years, you just said, right?
Right. So I got hired in May of 1994. Started at the rank of firefighter, obviously, and worked my way up through engineer, captain. I was a captain for probably about 9 years, and then a battalion chief for 3. And then in January, I was promoted to division chief of operations.
Congratulations. A lot of people probably would also know you as the one time you were active in the union with the fire department as well when you were a firefighter. I was.
I was blessed enough to spend 17 years on the local 50s executive board, 12 of which was president.
Okay. Well, let's just jump right into it. I guess maybe we could start out when if there's folks out there who listen to the scanner, and keep up with that stuff, and there are a lot of people out there who like that stuff. When we hear a call for a structure fire, can you maybe outline for us what a typical response from the Peoria Fire Department is going to look like, and maybe why some of those staffing decisions are made?
Sure. So if a report of a structure fire comes in, the first line, which we call, it's actually the first response, would be 3 engine companies, a truck company, a rescue squad, and a battalion chief. Now, all of those, except for the battalion chief, will have 3 firefighters on there. So our first line response is 16 people, counting the battalion chief. The reason we do that, well, actually, there's a multitude of reasons. We try to follow NFPA 1710 as close as we can. That's the national standard as far as what the response should be and how many personnel you should get to the scene.
And just, I don't want to interrupt you, but since some of the story that I've been working on sort of talks about a little bit of the differences between what career firefighters like you guys do versus how some volunteer departments operate. That NFPA standard, that's the National
Fire Protection Agency.
The 1710 that you referenced is the guideline for full-timers versus, I think, 1720 is a similar outline, but guidelines that are just a little bit different for the volunteers. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right. Sorry,
correct.
Go ahead.
No, not at all. So what we try to do for safety purposes and for efficiency purposes is try to get as many personnel to the scene as quickly as we can. And there's a variety of reasons why we try to do that. The first, obviously, is as we talked about, fire doubles in size every 90 seconds. So for every 90 seconds that you are not on that scene, and the clock ticks as soon as that fire starts, for every 90 seconds, that fire is doubling.
That's an exponential growth.
It's very, very large growth. And so it happens very quickly. So the faster we can get there and start taking care of the issue, the less damage to the residents and the property, obviously. A bigger reason is life safety. Obviously, people can't survive very long in a house fire. And, the reality is it takes a lot of skill plus a lot of luck to save someone for a house fire. I mean, that's just the reality of it. That's why we always preach that smoke alarms are so vitally important. Mm-hmm. We have saved several people from house fires. We've lost people in house fires. But the reality is you have to put yourselves in a position to have the best opportunity to save that individual or individuals. So that's the bigger reasons we get there. So we try to get there so quickly and try to get so many people. And then the other reason is it's a firefighter safety issue. The more people you have on the scene, the bottom line is the safer your firefighters are. It's an inherently dangerous job.
When you guys get on the scene, how do you deploy? We were talking earlier about is it 3 people on a
machine?
On a machine, but those first three guys roll up. Not all 3 of them go to search the house.
That's correct.
Tell us how that works.
So the first engine that gets on the scene, what they do depends on the situation. So if it comes in as someone is trapped inside or they believe someone is trapped inside, that first engine company with the 3 firefighters, they don't catch a hydrant. They go right in.
Okay.
Those first 2 firefighters will go in. The captain and the back end person will go in. If they're unsure or there's a report of no one inside, that first engine will stop and catch a hydrant, which means the hosman, the firefighter, will catch the hydrant. He'll stay at the hydrant. The other 2 will go forward in the machine. The driver, who we call the engineer, actually stays at the pump panel, and the captain is the one by himself or herself advancing the hose line in. Okay. The second engine company will come in, and they will always catch a hydrant, regardless of the first engine company did or not.
And regardless of whether the status of possible victims, second machine
will catch a hydrant. Because for 2 reasons. One is if someone is inside or believed to be inside, that first engine company didn't catch one.
Right.
So we have to. The second reason, even if they did catch one, that second engine company, it's imperative to get another hydrant just in case that first one's bad.
Okay.
So we always try to do redundancy in that respect. The first truck company that gets on the scene, again, depending on the situation, if someone is inside, they will be responsible for the initial search. Which makes it difficult because a big truck company responsibility is cutting the utilities, turning the gas off, and cutting the electricity. For any firefighter out there who's been in a house where the electricity has not been cut and water starts getting sprayed, you know how vital that truck company is and how important it is to get that electricity cut, because it's not a good feeling when that doesn't happen. So and there's 3 people on that machine as well, and they have the initial 3 or 4 minutes of that truck company is just ridiculously busy because of all the things they have going on. Follow it up with the third engine company. They'll usually pull. They'll help with the search or pull a second hand line in, which we call a backup hand line, to make sure fire does not get behind that first engine company.
Right, you want to keep it contained at a minimum, right?
Exactly. And what people don't understand is that fire is very similar to water. Water goes where there are openings. Fire is no different. So when it comes to construction, if there's been additions made, if the floors don't go all the way to the wall, we call that balloon construction, and fire will go all the way up. So a fire could originate in the basement, and next thing you know, it is in the attic. It might not be on the first floor, it might not be on the second floor, but it's all the way up in the attic, and that's because of voids.
Possibly through a wall or something like that. Okay.
Exactly. So that's why that's another reason why it's so important to get to it as quickly as you possibly can, because it just moves so rapidly. So
you mentioned sort of the construction variable or factor, determining to some degree how quickly fire spreads. I guess when I look at that, I think of it 2 different ways. There's the construction materials and techniques that have changed over the years that possibly contribute to that, but also changes in architecture styles where I think that older homes were probably a little bit more segmented,
right?
And newer homes, they, like we were talking about earlier, have lots of just great spaces, open spaces.
Absolutely.
So maybe if you could, let's talk about the form of houses and how that affects the way fire grows first.
Okay.
How do those variables work together?
Okay, so when you look at the older homes, they were really built very solidly. Heavy duty material. Whereas the newer construction houses, when you start moving out to the northern parts of the city, the newer constructions, we call that lightweight construction. So they have what we call lightweight trusses for the roofs. They use gusset plates, which is simply just not even a metal plate with a bunch of tacks in it, and that's how they connect those trusses. And we call them firefighter killers, because what happens is they fail in an incredibly short period of time.
Okay.
So what you see in these big, nice, huge houses is they will fail much, much quicker than the older houses. And it's funny because you hear people say, man, that's a brand new house. How could it, go up like that? Well, that's how. Yeah. It's because it's lightweight construction, and the materials, the connectors, and all those things that they use fail like that.
Well, and even the dimensional lumber isn't the same. A 2x4 isn't a 2x4 anymore. Right.
Exactly.
And I guess there's also, so much more reliance on plywood and particle board and that type of thing in modern construction materials. That burns faster.
It burns faster, and it's all about dollars. Without question, that's the motivating factor with regards to using these type of materials, is it cuts down on construction costs.
Sure.
But it's very detrimental for us, and especially in Peoria, where our fire coverage out in the northern parts of the city is we struggle a little bit just because it's so vast.
Yeah, you cover a lot of territory.
We cover a lot of territory. So when you're talking about engine 20 or engine 15, engine 19 with some
20's up on Wilhelm.
20's on Wilhelm, okay. 15's on Detweiler, okay. and 19's on Frostward.
Okay.
They have some areas in their territory where they're going to be alone for a while, and it's not an ideal situation. Obviously, the budget is what it is, but we really need to start looking at that part of the city. But getting back to the construction, you mentioned earlier, a lot of great rooms now, the wide open spaces.
Yep.
Fire loves those type of things because there's a lot of oxygen, a lot of air, and that's how fire grows, as we know. So, there are so many variables to why newer construction is very dangerous for firefighters.
Okay, and in terms of that element of danger, the amount, I guess, some of the materials that are used, not only in the construction, but just what you find in people's furniture now is a lot of synthetic fibers, these man-made petroleum-based materials, plastics, lots of plastics, and when those burn, that's much more dangerous in terms of inhaling that stuff than burning lumber, I guess.
Yeah.
Untreated lumber, it's not good. Nothing's good. None of that smoke is good to inhale, but
right.
This stuff is particularly dangerous. It releases some really toxic byproduct, formaldehydes, benzenes, hydrogen cyanide. Is that? Yeah, that's out there.
Yeah.
So, that's what leads to the most injuries, right? When we're talking about particularly fatal fires, it's usually from smoke inhalation.
Without question.
Okay.
Yeah. The majority of fire-related deaths, the autopsies reveal that they died of smoke inhalation, not from the burns themselves. We talked earlier that, everything needs to go right in order to save somebody from a fire. But it's imperative. We've always looked at it as far as Peoria goes. It's imperative to put those victims in the best possible position to be saved. And that means getting firefighters to the scene as quickly as you possibly can, and doing the job of going in and trying to find them.
Well, what's the in terms of that smoke inhalation risk? I think you had mentioned a little bit earlier. We're talking brain death in a matter of minutes.
4 to 6 minutes. Once the patient stops breathing, or the victim stops breathing, brain death occurs in 4 to 6 minutes. So we may be able to go in there and get them out and revive them, but they will not. Chances are they will not be neurologically intact.
It all depends on that response time.
Right.
Is there anything, and there may not be, specific to the Peoria area or the region or the Midwest in general that contributes to fire growth in terms of, I think in some areas, probably more rural areas that don't have natural gas lines going to their homes, they might have big propane tanks or natural gas tanks. Mm-hmm. Is there anything like that you guys come across regularly in Peoria that is specific to this area that's dangerous?
Yeah, we run into a lot of residences that have oxygen bottles because of people with pulmonary issues. And although generally speaking, it takes a lot to get them to explode.
Yeah.
We've probably had 2 or 3 fires over the course of my career. One jumps out of my mind down on the south end where as our first initial firefighters were going inside, there were bottles exploding and they're like missiles. So those are dangerous. Really outside of the construction materials we talked about, probably the biggest contributor to fire growth is accelerants. When we talk about arson and things like that, where and that's where we always, when we arrive on the scene and the house is fully involved, without question, it's going to be arson, just because we're fortunate enough to respond fairly quickly. So accelerants are what we face the most. Now, you're right, rural area is completely different. But as far as Peoria goes, when a fire is when a fire is way involved, when we get there, we're 99.9% sure accelerant was used, or a gas line was ruptured. But chances are that house will not be standing if it was a gas line ruptured.
Sure, that'd be a whole different set of problems. Actually, I was going to sort of get to that. In terms of the sort of the common causes of fires, we're talking smoking materials that were left. So candles, cigarettes, that type of thing. Food on the stove, right? That's another real common one.
Right.
Electrical's
big.
Okay. Yeah. And so, like you said, if you guys roll up and there's already fire going through the roof, chances are that was an accelerant was used, spread all through the house, so everything went up at once. When you see those fires that begin at a single point, like that with electric or food on the stove or something. How quickly does that grow? I mean,
well, a lot of it will depend on the material that's around that area.
Okay.
When you see, one of the biggest reasons that you'll see food on the stove maybe consume a kitchen is because most of the time there's a window right there with drapes. And so, or curtains, and that will catch that, or there's cabinets right above it. So a lot of that will depend on what is around the area, in the immediate area. And so, even a small spark from something, if you have boxes around that area, it could start a full fire. So that's why really we stress, whether it's at a business when we do business inspections or in residences, is to keep areas like that free of cardboard boxes, free of any debris. In the event something did happen, it will minimize the possibility of a fire starting.
Okay. What is do you have recommendations for, obviously that's a very general one. Do you have any other recommendations for homeowners? I guess if you said electrical is a pretty common problem, where do a lot of those fires originate? What can people do to avoid stuff like that?
Well, the things that jump out to me are, when it's real hot and real cold, we see a large growth in fires. And the reason being, when it's real hot out, we see people overloading circuits. They've
got the air conditioning on,
fans, you name it, all. They use zip cords, which is those real thin extension cords. We call them zip cords. And that's just, you can't plug anything big into those because it will start, without question, they will fail and start a fire. So that's what happens when it's real hot out. When it's real cold out, unfortunately, what we see is the lower income folks using their stoves and the ovens to heat their homes. They use candles, space heaters, things of that nature, and so we really see a large growth, and it's unfortunate, obviously, but the only thing we could recommend with regards to things like that are using those safety extension cords that have a trip on them if they get overloaded. Try to upgrade. I know it costs money, but try to upgrade your electrical box from fuses to breakers, and then just general housekeeping. It's incredible, some of the houses that we go into that are just packed.
Yeah, that's a lot of fuel for the fire.
It's a lot of fuel for the fire. It makes it very difficult for the occupants to get out. There was a thing done. A lot of people think that, well, if my house catches fire and it fills with smoke, I've lived here for 15, 20 years. I know my way out. I'll be able to feel my way out. What they did, we did a thing probably close to 20 years ago where we smoked up a family's home. Obviously, it wasn't real smoke during the middle of the night while they were laying down, and they knew this was going to happen. So this wasn't even a surprise, and they still got lost trying to get out of the home. So
we're a little overconfident.
A little overconfident, but
okay.
you throw in the anxiety, the stress of the situation, and again, this is something that they were prepared for.
Sure.
So you throw the fact in that you're not anticipating it, that it's a real situation, that smoke alarms are going off. It's difficult enough to get out of a residence without all of that other material in the way.
Okay. Well, we covered a lot of bases here. Just sort of going back to the basics, and you brought it up several times that the key issue is the quick response, get firefighters there as quickly as possible. What are some of the impediments to that? I mean, what might slow you guys down?
Traffic, traffic does. We've been pretty lucky as far as citizens paying attention to our machines. Call volume. We're over 20,000 calls a year, and we basically have the same personnel as we did in '86, where we ran 5,000 calls. So call volume is part of it, because what happens is let's say there's a house fire down in the Forest Territory, which is far south end.
Okay.
Engine 2 is a very busy machine, which would be the next engine company, and Engine 3 up at Bradley on Armstrong is a very busy machine. So, whereas in the past there was a strong likelihood where these machines would be in-house, that's just not the case anymore, because we're doing so many more things and
EMS calls, that type of thing.
EMS calls. We have divers, we have hazmat, we have trench rescue, high angle. So there's just so many things that we're doing now, and then training associated with all of those things. So I would say that's one of the impediments. That's probably the biggest one is the fact that our call volume has increased so much. But I can't state enough how important it is. Every tactic book out there, their number one thing that they say is the most important things for a successful outcome is getting as many people there as quickly as you can. And so that's what we follow. And it's not, I'll reiterate what I said. It's not just for the citizens, although that's our biggest concern. It's also for the safety of the firefighters. It's a proven fact that injury and death is directly correlated to the amount of firefighters you have. And then that's a proven fact. So
the likelihood of injury goes up with
exponentially,
okay,
without question. And so we take that as administration of the fire department. We take that with the utmost seriousness. The last thing we want. This is already an inherently dangerous job.
Sure.
We don't want to add to that by not getting people to the scene when we need to. And that's probably the biggest reason why, if there's a house fire in the Forest Territory, we don't call Engine 19, we don't call Engine 20, who are coming from the far north side. We're calling Engine 2, Engine 1, Engine 3 to get them there to protect our firefighters and knock the fire down.
What's the most common injury firefighters sustain?
A lot of cardiac issues. It's a highly stressful job. You're working in a less than pleasant environment, high heat. You have 75 pounds of gear on and a lot of stress. The city has done a good job. We used to have the toners that we would get to notify us of a house fire or an EMS call or whatever it may be. It would go from silent to blaring, and that stress on your heart, going from a relaxed state to an incredibly stressful state, is terribly detrimental to your cardiac health.
Well, and I think probably no matter how much experience or training you've had, you can't get rid of all the adrenaline that pours out.
Exactly. You may handle a little bit better, especially when you're talking about, if a house fire comes in where it says someone is trapped. We always consider a house to be occupied until we prove it otherwise. But when you talk about that situation, when you talk about a child being involved, whether it's a medical call, a car accident, those always get our adrenaline going. Shootings, any kind of violent crime. But you're right. No matter how seasoned you are, you can't control the fact that that's an anxious moment, and you're going to react that way. So I would say cardiac, a lot of knee injuries, a lot of falls. We have guys firefighters fall down stairs quite often just because it's really dark. chances are
you got a mask on.
You have a mask on.
Your visibility is impaired.
Visibility is usually zero, and you've had stuff falling from the ceiling, and so even though or there's stairs, there's still stuff.
It's not a clear path,
right? Holes in floors. We've had several firefighters fall through holes in floors and go into the basement. So there are a variety of injuries. So the last thing we want to do is compound that risk by not getting people there in a quick manner.
Very good. Well, I'm running out of questions real quick here, Tony. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you think people should know about any issue with firefighting, local or just general?
No, I would say, you covered all the areas, Matt. You did a great job. And the only thing I would stress is obviously continue to check your smoke detector batteries. Smoke detectors save lives without question. Make sure your kids are learning their address and in the street that they live on, and then have a game plan in the event something does happen, whether it's a medical emergency or whether it's a house fire. Have a game plan and be ready for it, because to think that you're going to be able to think of these things when the incident actually happens, it isn't going to happen. So have this ready beforehand and stay safe.
Practice it.
That's right.
Chief, thank you so much.
Matt, thank you.